Hi guys, while there has been a massive outpouring of grief for the Queen, many unionist politicians and commentators have tried to use this as a sign of the strength of the UK as a union of four nations. I and many others have commented on how powerful an image Elizabeth was both at home and abroad, and her almost mythical reign could be seen as a glue holding the UK together. I say seen as I'm not entirely convinced. Now that her son Charles will take over, that glue is going to have less and less of an effect, and the breakup of the UK is not a matter of if, but when. These are the thoughts of Sir Anthony Seldon, an historian and author. Have a listen.
It only happened in 1707, the union of parliaments, and Ireland was only united in 1801 and Wales in 1485 and then the 1530s legally. So it's a relatively new construct, the United Kingdom, and just because it existed separately before makes one think that those countries could indeed exist separately again in the future. Personally, I think it's a matter of when, not whether, Scotland will become independent. I think a lot depends upon the relationship that can be worked out with the EU and Scotland. It's a long time since a Prime Minister could truly speak to a United Kingdom and make all parts of the United Kingdom feel that the Prime Minister was speaking for them. And if the monarch doesn't have that same glue that Queen Elizabeth clearly had in Scotland, then that could be a worrying moment. This will be seen as a post-Brexit, post-change of monarch, post-assault on the impartiality and the integrity of the civil service and the judiciary, and with the BBC losing its gel, uniting the country with one voice in the face of the multiplicity of different media outlets with their own partisan perspectives. What will hold the still centre, as Yeats talked about in The Second Coming? We've just lost this week a mighty force gluing us together.
Very, very interesting take. And, he points out here how the union is basically being attacked on all sides. You have the BBC, which is less, or seen as less representative. It's difficult for it to present itself as a united voice, as a consequence of both Brexit and Tory policies. But the more interesting focus here for me is the role of the Prime Minister. So yes, we tend to focus on the monarch as the glue holding the union together, and to a certain extent Elizabeth did represent a glue holding the four nations together. I don't think it was extremely successful because of both Brexit and Tory policies. But now that she's gone, the king has massive shoes to fill. And I don't think he's up to the task. And it's not a criticism of him, but I think there's been so much damage done that it's practically impossible for the union to be saved by the monarch. The more interesting point of all of this is as I said, the role of the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister has not commanded support of the people of Scotland for many, many years. It could be argued the last Labour government commanded support of the Scottish people, but that's gone. The focus has to be today. And if we look at Theresa May, Boris Johnson, and in particular Liz Truss recently saying that she would ignore the First Minister, which means by extension ignoring the Scottish people. That's not good for the union. And when I saw that clip, I thought, okay, if you're a unionist in Scotland, you must be throwing something at the TV. You must be tearing your hair out, because the Prime Minister, as Sir Anthony points out, is part of this glue. And if the Prime Minister doesn't speak to the union, doesn't speak to people in Scotland or Northern Ireland, and with Northern Ireland is moving further and further towards a united Ireland, Scotland is of course moving further and further away from a union it feels does not represent it. It has no real voice in Westminster, and Westminster ignores the interests of the Scottish people. That's the feeling in Scotland. The Prime Minister ignoring the First Minister, the Prime Minister ignoring Scotland. So Scotland sees itself as leaving one union where it doesn't have a voice, and joining another union, the European Union, where it would have a voice. It would be represented. It would have much more clout on the world stage than it does at the moment. So there would be net benefits for Scotland if it joined the European Union. Ironically, all of this as a consequence of Brexiteers wanting to move further and further away from Europe. If Brexit didn't happen, I think the road to Scottish independence would be much longer than what we're facing at the moment. So a very interesting take here on all of this, the role of the monarch as the glue holding the union together. But for me, the bigger and more interesting part of all of this is the role of the Prime Minister. And unless something changes, that glue is not going to have any real effect. Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think about all of this. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot.